Hi, and welcome back to the Warm Line 2.0 from Pacific Lutheran University. These last 5 weeks, we've been engaging in relevant topics for this time and place, and on this show, from faith perspectives and with spiritual lenses. I'm Jen Rude, I'm the university pastor at PLU, and today's conversation is about grief and letting go and preparing for a new thing. And I'm really excited today to welcome Bishop Richard Jaech. Welcome to the show, Bishop Jaech.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation today.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. So just for those watching, Bishop Jaech is the bishop of our local area of Lutheran churches, and so the Southwestern Washington Synod of the ELCA. He's also a member of the PLU Board of Regents, so the governing body of PLU. And his office is right across the street from PLU, so we are also geographic neighbors. Bishop Jaech has really been shepherding our larger church community through this time of crisis in these days of pandemic and white supremacy and racism, just all sorts of things going on that he's been sort of leading our congregations through. So I thought he would be a good person to bring on the show today to help us look at grief and letting go, and then seeing where possibilities exist, where God might be working, and how we might be attentive to the new thing becoming possible. So, Bishop Jaech, we'll just sort of jump right in here.
Okay.
There is so much loss going on right now, right? From loss of health or even loss of life, loss of employment, loss of a sense of security, maybe a loss of opportunity, a loss of connection. And some folks are definitely experiencing a loss of hope, that we are continuing to fight the same injustices that we've been fighting for generations. So kind of a weariness there. So what do you think is the role of grief in the face of so much loss, both individually and collectively?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. And I agree with you that there just is a lot of pervasive grief and anxiety and stress for so many important reasons. So it really is around us. When I think about grief, I think of it as kind of an umbrella word for a number of different emotions. Actually, my wife, Satya Jaech, who's a psychotherapist, has helped me think about that. She's done workshops actually with people around grief and loss and so forth. And she's helped me see that grief is a word we use, but there can be a number of feelings underneath it. So underneath it could be a sense of sadness, a sense of hurt that we've been hurt by something, a sense of anger that something isn't right, or even some sense of numbness. Is just that there's so much happening, just feel numb. So I think that one useful way of dealing with grief is to think of it as a window that we can open to have greater awareness. First, about what's really going on with us. So if I'm feeling a general sense of loss or grief, to go underneath that and say, well, okay, what's the deeper emotion? Am I feeling hurt right now? Am I feeling out of control? Am I feeling angry? So it's a window for awareness, but then the awareness can be, first of all, released. Like instead of keeping everything bottled up inside, you can actually express it. But secondly, a window to action to say, okay, if I can get more clear about exactly what I'm feeling here, I can decide what to do about it. I may not be able to address the whole situation. I might not be able to solve all the problems, but I can say, okay, what am I feeling and what do I want to do about it today? So I think that we're seeing that happen around us in the protest march on the streets, in the political action, in church people reaching out to each other, in new attempts of communication online. People are feeling loss, feeling grief, but they're also saying, okay, what's that about? And how can it be a window for me doing something about it?
I find that so helpful, that window metaphor, really kind of getting clear and investigating what's underneath that.
Right.
I think that's a helpful strategy for really diving into what the grief is about.
Yeah.
Grief is one of the emotions. You named a lot of emotions, right? And this can be a really overwhelming. Like you mentioned, COVID pandemic, the deep wounds of racial injustice, our current political climate, all of those things. And you, as both a spiritual leader and as an individual person, are very engaged. So I wonder, maybe you can share with us a little bit about how do you not get overwhelmed Or maybe a better question is, how
Right,
do you stay in the work even when you do get overwhelmed?
right, right, right. There are a lot of times when I feel overwhelmed, and we have major, as you've mentioned, the pandemic, the political turmoil, economic uncertainty, um, the personal family things that happen when you can't see people. Any one of those things by itself would be enough to feel overwhelmed. And when you got 4 or 5 or 6 of them together, it really happens. And I think that in terms of what I try to, so I do have those feelings. It's not like I avoid feeling overwhelmed. I'm a person, like a lot of us, I'm a person who likes to feel that I have control of my life, that I can manage life, I can control what's going on. So for me, a big thing is that there's just so much uncertainty that we just don't know how the pandemic exactly is going to play out. We just don't know what the economy is going to do. We just don't know who's going to be elected in November. So part of how I deal with it is to, first of all, admit I do not have control of this situation. I do not have complete control. Um, there are huge problems. But then going back to the awareness thing, okay, now what's most important to me? What's coming through as being really vital? What's one thing I could do right now to address one of my deepest needs? So instead of feeling totally out of control, to say, okay, what's something I do have control about, which typically isn't other people, but I have control of myself. I can make a decision about what I'm going to do. The other key thing for coping with feelings of being overwhelmed is to remind myself that I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Part of the feeling overwhelmed is like it's all up to me, and I got to figure it out by myself. So in the spiritual faith of Christianity, a central belief is that God is with us and God is for us. That's one of the things Martin Luther said. God is with us and God is for us. So we're not alone in that sense, but we have each other. I think so often when there's feelings like grief, we often think we're the only one feeling it, and we're kind of embarrassed to admit that we're overwhelmed. It's really helpful just to begin to talk with one another about it, to discover we're not alone, but also to get strength. Right now we're celebrating John Lewis, the life of John Lewis, who was such a sign of strength and of justice for us. And so he was by himself a center of strength. But John Lewis also modeled the importance of relationship. When he walked across the bridge that day, he was not walking alone. He was walking with a whole crowd of siblings, of people who cared about faith and justice. And that's a model for us of, instead of trying to do it alone, to really admit we need other people, talk with other people, and become partners with other people. That helps. I'll go back and forth between peace and feeling overwhelmed, but I can remind myself about that when I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I think too, not only do we have people in our current contemporary world who can be partners and companions with us, but in faith and spiritual context, we have our ancestors, right? Those who have gone before us that can bring us strength and comfort. One of the passages that kind of keeps coming back to me in this time is a passage from Isaiah that really speaks to me about grief and healing and sort of what new life is possible. And that's from Isaiah 43. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? And that's God speaking. So, the prophet, sharing the words of God. It seems to me that it speaks to this idea that we do need to let some things go. I'm not sure if we can go so far as to not remember, but that we need to let some things go in order to perceive the new thing that God is doing. Can you talk a little bit about grief and letting go and how that makes space for encountering a new thing?
Right. I think, again, grief has to do with, what are we losing? What's not there? What's being taken away from us, and all the feelings that go with that. And I think that part of the question is, can we hope? Do we have any basis to hope when we're in the process of disruption and losing things? And I think the promise of God that comes through in that beautiful passage from Isaiah, which is also one of my favorite passages, is that we are not only in the midst of destruction and things breaking apart. We are in the process of God doing a new thing. So that passage in Isaiah, the Israelites they had been captive in exile in Babylon, and now God was going to set them free to go back to their homeland. But when they got back there, that homeland was going to be completely different. So I think that right now we feel like we've lost our homeland. We're shut up inside our houses, or people are out of work, or people are in street corners yelling at each other. Rather than, what helps me to think about is this passage offers the promise that God is at work, and particularly where things are falling apart, what's being built, what's being created. I think right now, and this is something I'm thankful for, the whole structure of white privilege is being challenged and being broken apart. The whole structure of male privilege. As a white man, I have inherited rank and authority and privileges, but it's not working. The system is not working for all kinds of people, including me. So there's a part of me that does not like that system, that structure of privilege breaking apart, because I get payoff from it. But the bigger part of me, the deeper part of me says, this is God at work. God is fashioning a new world in which there is equity, there is equality, in which people of all colors are valued and esteemed. We're men and women, we're straight and gay. I just think that to hold on to that hope. And so one of the things to do is, when I feel like I'm in a situation where all of a sudden I'm feeling overwhelmed and things are falling apart, is just ask myself the question, what's God doing here? I feel like everything's being lost, but God is taking us on another adventure, another walk through the wilderness. What is God doing here? And look for that, both to find hope, but also to be on the right side and say, okay, this is where we're going.
Yeah. The question from Isaiah, God, do you not perceive it? Right? I'm doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? And I think you bring up the idea, there's a lot of reasons that we don't perceive it.
Right.
We might be overwhelmed, or it might be our own privilege, like something's working for us, or we think
Right.
it is, even though it's
Right.
not really. So there's a lot of barriers to us
Right.
perceiving this
Right.
new thing that God is doing. So how do you remain attentive to God's work and action in the world, and attentive to this new thing that God may be doing in you or calling you to do?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, because a lot of times again, like other people, I get so involved in the work of doing things. I get in order to seize control or get control back, I write down my list of what I'm going to do, and I'm totally focused. And I really do need people to remind me to stop and pray or stop and meditate. Sometimes God just throws us a total curve that shocks us, and my car has had 3 flat tires over the last 3 months, and that never happens. So it may just be a nail on the road, but it may be God saying, okay, you got to slow down a little bit. You got to start paying attention to, The other thing is that I've learned, as a spiritual practice, I've learned that I literally need to stop and breathe. In other words, sometimes I need cognitive help. Sometimes I need a book or a person that gives me the idea and says words that help me to stop and think and look for God. But most often, body practices of meditation and prayer is what I need. And so for me to just stop and breathe, and to breathe more deeply, first to breathe in God's presence and power, but also to breathe in some message, some sense of where I need to be,
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is I need to be in nature. The backdrop I took as I'm talking to today is up just outside of Holden Village. But for me to be up in the mountains, both with a sense of vision, with a sense of seeing things, to say, okay, what do I need to see right now? But also to stand on solid ground and let me feel that ground. We talk about, one of the phrases for God is the ground of being. To go to a place, even if I'm sitting in my home, to sit down, but really feel my feet on the ground and feel like they're going through the rug and through the floorboards. They're really resting on the ground, and say, okay, I am not alone. I'm not floating. God is supporting me. How can what do I need right now? Open myself up. Or sometimes I lean against a tree. I love to go camping in the redwoods. They're like, it's a cathedral place. And sometimes I just lean against a tree or embrace a tree and sense that that tree is rooted and drawing up the water of life, and that's what I need right now. So those are spiritual practices, but that also, again, helps me get in touch, literally in touch with what is God doing? What might God be doing right now?
Yeah, I really resonate with that, needing to sort of get grounded and feel the sturdiness of the earth underneath me in order to kind of what you said, like pause and breathe and notice. That's something that I've kind of been working on, is how do I not just kind of do what I want to do and then be like, hey, God, can you come over and bless this thing I'm doing? But to sort of like get attentive to, where is God already working? Where is the Spirit already stirring things up? And if I can perceive that, I can join in that work that's already happening. And I don't have to be on my own, right? I can join the sort of movement of the Spirit. So that's something I've been, trying to work on too. But it does involve like getting sturdy, taking a breath, being open to perceive.
This is obviously an incredible time of transition for the Christian church and for the Lutheran church that you and I are part of. We already knew that life wasn't going to continue on the same as it was in the 50s and the 60s, but in so many ways, the life of the church and the structure of the church is shaking right now. And so that can get me scared, but I also really think it's the action of God to get us back into the community. We have benefited from our wonderful church buildings, and they will continue to be a resource for us. But God is shaking us up to get us back out into the community. Not just to help people, that's part of it, but to meet people who actually are God's gifts to us. So I think that we've got an incredible road ahead of us, an incredible adventure ahead of us. And we need each other's strength and we need God's strength. But that's the new thing that God is doing. We don't know quite what it is yet, but we'll only find out by heading out there and keeping our eyes open and holding on to each other. So that's what's exciting about this time.
I loved that when kind of the administration was like, we need to open the churches. We need to open the churches. And all these church people responded, we've been open. Churches have not closed. We are not in our buildings, but we are open because we are people who are in our neighborhoods. We are people who are gathering via Zoom. We are people who are attentive to those around us. So the church is still open. It's been open this whole time. But I appreciate that, like, it's a new way for us, which can be a little bit scary, but also like full of possibility and hope. And that it's not us designing something new, but it's us participating in something that God is doing new.
Pastors are telling us great stories about how they're suddenly doing online worship and they're hearing from people in Nebraska and Florida and Japan that are all of a sudden attending their worship. I mean, in some ways, we are more out in the world and we're also more in touch with each other because we can't just presume on the old ways of seeing each other on Sunday morning. So churches and pastors and deacons have been doing a wonderful job of connecting with their members, of connecting them together in Zoom sessions, and in trusting themselves to be out in the world in new ways. So I think that's very good.
Yeah. Some of the folks that we hope are watching these 5-part series are incoming students and returning students and faculty and staff. So really thinking about kind of university life. That will be different this fall, certainly. We're not exactly sure how, right? Things are unfolding every day, but it will be different. Do you have any sort of advice or tips or wisdom to share with folks as we kind of enter into this fall filled with uncertainty, but also feeling called to continue this path together, to continue our mission of education, to continue our mission of community building, of social justice?
Yes. Two things come to mind as you ask that question. One, again, is that don't try to do it by yourself, including the feeling part. If you're feeling, overwhelmed or if you're feeling scared, those are very normal and appropriate feelings right now. And we tend to hide them and keep them in, but that's hard to do, and it's very healthy. So if you're a student coming in, find some good staff people that you meet right off the bat and let them know not just your question about when does the chemistry class take place, but how you're feeling about things. Find other students. I think we try to be brave, particularly when we go off to college, like we're grown up and we want to come off smart and clever and attractive to people. And so it's hard for us to admit the parts of us that are struggling. So it's a real sign of strength to be able to admit who you fully are. That's one thing. The other thing is that particularly in the whole academic field, we really prize what we know, and we should. I mean, university is about learning. It's about getting things into our head, and that's good. I'm not at all denying that. But there's so much that we don't know right now, and actually true learning is to be presented with mystery and unsolved problems. And so it's going to be natural that we're going to feel very aware and even embarrassed by what we don't know, because university is all about knowing. That's true for faculty and staff and students. We pride ourselves in knowing a lot. So hold on to that passion for knowing, but allow yourself to enter the mystery of not knowing and follow that path, because that's where new discovery happens. And again, do it with friends, do it with companions, because the road is much easier when we have somebody to walk it with. So those are the two things that come to my mind.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been so like grounding, actually, for me as well, and I hope it is for the folks who are listening. I really appreciate you taking time to spend with us today, sharing deep insights and also just really practical ideas about how we can continue to journey this path and to do it together. So thank you so much for being
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. You're doing a great ministry at PLU, but just your posing these questions helps me remember things that I've forgotten that are important. So these kind of conversations are really good. So I appreciate that. So it's good to be with you today.
Great. Thank you so much. So that wraps up our 5-week series for this summer. I want to especially thank our producer, Thomas Kyle Millward, who has been behind the scenes working on all these Zoom recordings for us for these 5 sessions. I also encourage you to check out all the other shows on the PLU Community YouTube channel that have been following some of these same themes, but from different perspectives. So thanks all, and be well.